Hello, Global Environmental Issues class. We're group plans with Adele, Yuta, you, Christine, Charlie, and Chelsea. And we'll be presenting about land issues around the world in 5 different countries, presenting a case for each barrier that we find and some things in the area that are being used to overcome these barriers. It's important to understand why we should care about our given theme, which is land. And one of the biggest reasons that we found for caring about land issues is because land sustains a circle of life in the ecosystem. When you start from land, land supports the plant life within an area, which supports the animals which live in the area, which supports us in turn, so that we can live with the ecosystem. And so we need to be taking care of land so that we can take care of this pyramid of life that we depend on as humans. In the course of our studies, we found 5 different barriers through 6 different countries that we kind of want to discuss using each different country as a case study. The 5 different barriers we have are listed up here. They're geographical, economic, technological, political in 2 different countries, and barriers to human rights. In Cambodia, there are 3 different kind of geographical barriers that I'd like to look at. There's the lack of irrigation, which means that there's less productive harvests that only produce 1 harvest when there could be maybe 2 or 3 if there were irrigation. And this kind of results in reliance on the rain. There's also buried landmines that are still active in the northwest region of Cambodia, which means that there's land that can't be used and that resources have to be diverted to deal with this issue instead of looking into kind of the agricultural development of the land. There's also a problem with dams that are proposed and created along the Mekong River and its tributaries, and also the Tonle Sap Lake. And these adversely affect the wildlife in the area, and they could reduce water flows if all of them are implemented. Some activities that are there to counteract these geographical barriers are the creation of an irrigation system. And according to the Asian Development Bank, this is going to take on reconstruction rather than rehabilitation, because the original irrigation system program that was implemented didn't take into account the realities of the local ecosystem. So there's research being done there as well. There's also decommissioning of landmines, so that they're training people to deal safely with these landmines and going around systematically looking for landmines and blowing them up. There's also been machinery donated from Japan that is used to kind of help deal with the ecology around the area, so that trees that are in the way get cut down before people go in to safely blow up these landmines. There's also been a call for reevaluation of these dam plans through media coverage and protests within the country as well.
I'll be discussing about the economic barriers with the case study regarding the land issues in Kenya. And first of all, one of the greatest issues, the barriers that Kenya is facing are non-tariff barriers. So in the case of this non-tariff barriers, these barriers are hampering grain trades in Africa, and it kind of links to issues regarding food insecurity. Another issue that can be faced regarding economic barriers are the transportation, in other words, market access. So there are lots of situations where many people face this issue because they can't actually send abundant amount of food to other places, causing food insecurity, because it creates a gap between the rich food and the poor food people. And another issue that people face is government intervention. So these corrupted governments actually intervene within the market, fragmenting the markets, especially regarding import and export restrictions. And the last issue could be the issue regarding the gap between the rich and poor. So rich farmers have more economic powers within the market, as well as having a more advanced technology, which the poor farmers can't actually embrace. So this causing a inequality between land issues as well. So in order to tackle the issue regarding these barriers that Kenya has faced, there's been a few proposals, and the first could regard about safety nets where government and organizations have thrived towards for. So regarding the goals, it will be reducing taxations on fuel and production inputs, Second would be protection of food assistance programs. Third of all, expansion of relief, food, and cash transfers. And four, labor-based safety net interventions would also be the goals that governments and organizations have aimed for. Another solution can be regarding multi-environmental agreements, where Kenya has actually been a part of several agreements, and the first could be is the Eastern African Grain Council, where it has reached a consensus regarding regional trade politics to facilitate cross-border trade in food products. Second, Kenya has also joined the African Free Trade Zone, where it will try to eradicate tax barriers regarding the agricultural sector. And last of all, Kenya has also joined the Agreement on Agriculture, which is an international treaty of the World Trade Organization, for the purpose to support farmers to stimulate the agricultural development regarding trade and tariffs.
Next, I'll discuss technological barriers regarding the urbanization in Myanmar. In Myanmar, the growth of urban area is vital to a country's economic development. However, because of the technological barriers, the potential environmental pollution in the area has not been checked effectively. The statistics shows that the population of urban area rose about 1.5 times higher since 1973, and the number of vehicles on the road doubled since 2004, which may cause a various pollution in the air and water. Yet, there has been a lack of sufficient survey conducted to measure CO2 emission, water pollution, and other potential causes of the pollution. The significant data gap must be improved by supporting technological improvement. Thus, to tackle this gap, capacity building projects in technological area should be conducted by international organizations. The project includes improving capacities in information systems, statistics, and scientific research. Building those capacities will be essential for track and monitor important indicators of environmental pollution caused by urban development.
Food and land security is highly rooted to economic policy, which can be seen in this next example. In developed countries, corruption is rarely viewed as a political and economic barrier to food and land security. However, some may argue that corporate lobbying and loopholes in tax law allow for corruption in politics in the United States. Recently, in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, ruled that corporations are protected by the First Amendment to spend money on political causes and campaigns. While directly giving money to politicians is outlawed, this ruling, coupled with a loophole in IRS tax law, essentially permits corporations to use unlimited amounts of money to convince or coerce politicians to represent corporate interests in the White House. This loophole allows corporations to pay a nominal fee to the IRS instead of reporting how much money they are spending on political causes. Corporations can therefore threaten politicians that they will spend unlimited amounts of money creating negative campaign ads against that politician's re-election if that politician doesn't represent the corporation's interests in Washington. Corporations and lobbying giants such as Monsanto can therefore use this loophole to prevent and block policies supporting green and sustainable agriculture and promote policies including the expansion and the strengthening of cash cropping, industrial farming, and the pesticide industry. In order to combat this barrier and achieve food and land security, it makes the most sense to seek policy changes regarding both the court ruling, Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, and the IRS loophole. These policy changes could include imposing a limit to lobbying by corporate bodies or eliminating lobbying altogether. These activities will require sub-activities, including increasing public awareness of consumers and voters who can pressure corporations and politicians to engage in and introduce more sustainable agriculture and food policies.
So hello everyone, my name is Adele and I'm here to talk to you about the political barriers in India. So the first political barrier that I'm going to address is overpopulation. So India actually has the second biggest population in the world. Overpopulation is having an impact on India's agriculture, leading to land degradation, overuse and mismanagement. Therefore, for crop, livestock or tree production purposes, consists usually of removing too much, returning too little, and cultivating, grazing or cutting too often. With a growing population, it's not possible for the agricultural sector to absorb more workers. And this actually results in the formation of mega policies, which leads to underdevelopment traps, which therefore leads to crime in city areas. So the money that is used for that could actually be used and put towards the agricultural sector. So that's something that the government, the Indian government, could handle. The second political barrier is the fact that there are blanket agricultural policies. In India, there is conflict regarding agriculture being the state responsibility, whilst policy is formed by the country's central government, which plays an important role in the recommendation of national agricultural policies. There are some disparities among the states in agricultural progress, whilst some states are agriculturally progressed and some states do lag behind. So in India, the use of water and power for agriculture is heavily subsidized as well in these areas, resulting in excessive drawing of power and depletion of groundwater resources. And the third issue is that the current government policies do not align with India's agricultural pace of development in terms of world food security demands. So India is seen as a food powerhouse. So in the 1970s, they did make progress through their Green Revolution and expansion. However, through the years, India has really experienced a boomerang effect. So that those policies are now irrelevant today, which is resulting in a misalignment with the current government policies as well as India's pace. So India really needs to create a realistic policy. So in order to tackle these political barriers, the government needs to resolve this issue of overpopulation. So there's a popular saying, you shouldn't put all your eggs into one basket. So if India alleviates this agricultural sector by providing their people with training in other job sectors as well as create new jobs, this will help to resolve the issue of land degradation by overuse on the one hand and prevent the formation of megapolises or slum areas on the other hand, which in turn can create pollution problems in India as well. So in regard to the second political barrier, in order to solve the barrier of current government policies, the government needs to create new realistic policies that cater to each state, since each state handles their own agricultural sector. And they need to think about the current status of the world's agricultural markets and the current predicament of India's agricultural sector, and they need to set realistic, attainable goals for their agricultural sector to reach. And in regard to the third barrier, a solution there could be policymakers need to move away from the existing policy and institutional regime that appears to be no longer realistic for India achieving its agricultural goals and build a solid foundation for a much more productive, internationally competitive and diversified agricultural sector.
A major barrier regarding the deforestation issue in Indonesia is the barrier to human rights. Many people may wonder how deforestation correlates to human rights. To begin, deforestation in Indonesia has been a problem for more than half a century. In recent years, the expansion of the logging and plantation markets have made the problem worse, significantly so for those living in the unoccupied land. Until recently, the Indonesian government allowed private corporations to use the land for their private use, without the permission of its inhabitants. This led to an emergence of tension between the indigenous inhabitants and the private corporation. Basically, because the indigenous people only make up less than 1% of the total population, and to add, the government are hesitant to offer them special privileges, they are not considered a priority. The lack of respect and effort by the government to recognize the situation critically not only leads to human rights issues, but also to the continuation of rapid deforestation, which is harmful to both the indigenous people and the environment. The possible first step to solving this problem would be to continue raising the awareness of such issue in the political arena. However limited, the possibility, if successful, governments will enforce current regulations regarding private-run deforestation, which will in return improve the situation for both the people and the environment.
In conclusion, we've covered various topics within several different countries around the world. But it's important to understand that each activity requires grassroots level help. Something that ties them all together is that you have to start at the grassroots level with awareness raising, and you have to have a call to action for corporation and governments to change the way that they try and develop these areas. And from there, you move on to the corporate level, which aims more at economic activities within the area, and up to the governmental level that tries to change things on a political spectrum and on a more broad, all-encompassing range. And so we'd like to call on everyone watching this presentation to help us change the future, because the future begins with us, and only you can change the future. Call on corporations to change their corporate activities in regards to developing land. Call on governments to create more sustainable projects in regards to land, and to fund only those projects that will help sustain the ecosystem. Thank you all for watching, and we hope we've inspired you to be more aware of land issues.